Hi, my name is Ashley Jessup, and today I'll be giving a speech on standardized testing. Standardized testing is the primary measure of accountability in the United States education system. These tests are constructed to form a standardized process to measure the academic success of children, teachers, and schools. By standardizing the process, the results are theoretically free of bias and function to help deduce effectiveness of schooling systems. However, standardized testing has been heavily criticized over the years for failing to meet these goals. By turning this framework to education, it is possible to answer questions that might otherwise be unclear. For example, why standardized tests are still so prevalent. If the criticism of these tests is that they do not benefit the schools, students, and teachers they are designed for, then functionalism would ask who they are functioning for. By examining the questions from this angle, existing evidence supports the idea that tests are most effective for policymakers and education researchers. Standardized testing's history can best be traced back to a man named Horace Mann, who created the Common Test to improve equality amongst the students in 1845, which is stated by Gallagher in contrasting his intentions. This would lead to the standardized test becoming a popular method of determining general intelligence through IQ tests in the 1910s, as a method to eliminate slow children from classroom, which is stated by Gallagher in A History of Achievement Testing in the United States, or explaining the persistence of inadequacy. This continued until the publication of the Coleman Report in 1966. This report substantiated the ideas that school resources were not a predominant measure of academic success, which directly led to President Nixon slashing funding for education in 1970. This reduced spending, leading to an increased reliance on standardized testing as a cheap alternative to other accountability measures, which is shown through Cunningham's missing the mark standardized testing as epistemological erasure in U.S. schooling. Now, the Every Student Succeeds Act, published in 2016 by President Obama, worked to decentralize testing and opened up the possibilities of alternative accountability measures. Despite this, changes away from standardized testing are slow. Testing serves to function in three primary categories: diagnostic, evaluative, and accountability. As a diagnostic tool, tests serve to diagnose the weakness of particular students or schools, allowing for the potential of immediate change to resolve said weakness. In this way, tests can determine whether students might need to hire a tutor or be held back, which is stated by Bruna. As an evaluative tool, tests can be used to evaluate the effectiveness of policy implementations. This can be used to determine gaps in curriculum, as determine differences in outcomes between different groups, which was also proved in Bruno in one pandemic-related test waiver request suggests we're going to keep going about testing priorities as an accountability tool. Tests are used to ensure no, we're going to keep going. The teachers and schools are doing what they can by tying fundamental funding attention to test scores. Tests can determine if schools and teachers succeed in hitting specific benchmarks. In these categories, there are a lot of overlap in function, but the wide range limits the effectiveness of tests. If a test is trying to evaluate the effectiveness of a policy change, how much of the success of a class can be attributed to teacher performance versus policy interaction versus a strong student class for that year? When tests try to measure too many things, there is a decrease in the overall effectiveness. Tests tend to fail in a variety of other ways as well. The emphasis of testing as an accountability measure shifts the focus onto the specific subjects that are tested for. This focus can create discrepancies between test performance and overall academic ability. This also leads to a shift in the styles of teaching, as teachers may teach to a test, which was proved in Fay Hale and Hutt, A History of Achievement Testing in the United States, or explaining the persistence of inadequacy. The teaching of specific test-taking strategies can overshadow the actual material that is supposed to be learned. Other criticisms include the waste created by tests. Standardized testing can be very time-consuming. The process of taking the tests alone is measured and account for 1.6% of all in-school time. Furthermore, testing has become very expensive for schools. The average school district spends $650 million a year on standardized testing. With a general idea of its purposes and weaknesses, it is possible to explore how tests benefit or fail different groups. Standardized tests are often criticized for their lack of effectiveness, but from a functionalist perspective, they are working exactly as designed to benefit the policymakers that have created these tests in the first place. By understanding this, it is possible to recognize that policymakers hold the keys to cultural change, and whether performance outcomes for students and teachers will be emphasized. Thankfully, with the passing of the Every Student Succeeds Act, power has been slightly restored to schools and teachers. This encourages the implementation of alternative accountability testing measures. Multiple accountability structures can be implemented to function for different groups. For example, standards-based accountability measures are now being pursued as a means of incentivizing student learning outcomes over test-based achievement accountability. These measures work in conjunction with traditional standardized tests to create a more comprehensive examination of school success. This would bring the United States more in line with education systems across the globe, as the mixing of methods can be better utilized to benefit all individuals involved in the complicated process of education. Thank you so much. This is my audience. Woo, the real people.